middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
चुन चुन करके हिसाब लेना ये मेरी फितरत है.
Why should it be a problem? If I'm smart enough to have multiple options, you should be admiring me.
भारत झुकने वाला भी नहीं.
The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others.
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. Why will de-dollarization not happen in your lifetime? Once again, de-dollarization. So, in October 2024, we all know what happened, right? All the BRICS leaders, they got together in Kazan summit, Russia. And I'm talking about all the big names. President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Modi, President Lula, President Ramaphosa, all of them in the same room with President Vladimir Putin hosting. He's the man who West wanted to isolate really, really hard, but failed. And what came out of that summit? The usual. They're going to challenge the dollar. They're building alternative payment systems. The petrodollar is finished. And you have heard all these stories, right? In fact, so much so that people started to give advice on the internet that how your retirement will be gone, how the American 401k will disappear, all that thing. The media loved it. In fact, it sent lots of retirees and older folks into panic too. Media loved it. Same headlines we get every single time these guys meet. But here's the thing. In the year 2000, dollar made 72% of all global foreign exchange reserves. And today that number is 57%. So yes, dollar has dropped 15% points in 25 years. That's real. Yes, that number is accurate. That's good. But nobody ever asks the obvious question. Can you guess the obvious question? The obvious question is, where did that 15% actually go? What happened to that 15%? Who took that lion's share of the meal, of the meat? Because if you know where it went, you know whether de-dollarization is actually happening or whether this is just the most recycled story in financial media. Pretty much on the YouTube as well. And I promise you the answer is not what de-dollarization crowd wants you to think. Yes, I said it right. Like, you heard me right, actually. De-dollarization crowd. There is a de-dollarization lobby. Okay, a lobby that has a wishful thinking that dollar will collapse, or say not dollar will collapse, dollar should collapse, America is destroyed, all that good stuff. Okay, but we are going to answer that question today properly with data as to why de-dollarization will not happen in your lifetime. If you're new here, this channel is about how global systems actually work, not how the headlines say they work. Okay, please do like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos. Hit the bell icon. Let's get right into it. Okay, so first and foremost thing, let me share my slide as usual. Okay, de-dollarization will not happen in your lifetime unless a new bloc achieves what Europe took 50 years to achieve. Okay, now here's my position on this whole thing. Okay, my position is, once again, let me share my slide. My position is very simple, and I'm gonna make it very clear upfront. Okay, the de-dollarization is not just unlikely under current conditions; is structurally impossible. Not in 10 years, not in 20 years, not in 30 years. It's just structurally impossible. At least with the current state of affairs, the way things are, the way uh, right now, the way global structure is. Now, some of you like, okay, so if it is currently impossible, then how certain countries are trading in non-dollar currencies? Look, just because you take out 1 or 2 spoon of water from the ocean doesn't mean that ocean is gonna dry up or dry out. Okay, so what I'm saying, what I mean by structurally impossible is that conditions required for it to happen simply don't exist right now under the current structure of the global order. Okay, but not all is lost. There is one scenario that could change this, and I'll get to that later on in the video, so stay with me till the end. Okay, this is going to be very interesting video, I promise you, and that will open your eyes so that you don't fall for all this de-dollarization narrative that's out there. And I can assure you that this is not, de-dollarization thing is just a narrative, and that's about it. Okay, but before I do any of this, let me show you 3 reasons why this keeps going nowhere. As you can see on my slide, number one is that there is only one time, that is one known precedent. Okay, one precedent, that there's only one time in the modern history that reserve currency was seriously challenged. Once, without any world war or anything, is what I mean when I say seriously challenged, without any kind of world war. Once, and that it took, and what it took actually sets the bar for everything else. That will be the baseline. Okay, that you have to have minimum of that system in order to really achieve a proper forced de-dollarization. I'm not talking about a country got sanctioned, so dollar is taken away from you, so you say, oh, that's de-dollarization. No, that's not de-dollarization. Okay, kicking somebody out of the home versus people selling their home are two different things. Okay, there is a big difference. So just because somebody hears this news that, oh, China has cashed in 20 billions of, say, treasury bonds, de-dollarization happening, 20 billions of treasury bonds, guys. US stock market is worth $60 trillion, and that includes your day-to-day trading, that includes your treasury securities, everything. $60 trillion. You really think that $20 billion taken out of that thing is going to be, because it's going to cause de-dollarization? I will let you decide that. Okay, so first instance is that there is only one time in modern history after the Bretton Woods systems that reserve currency was seriously challenged. Once, that's it. And what it took sets the bar for everything else. Second is the BRICS cannot clear that bar. In its current state, BRICS just cannot do that. Not because they don't want to, but because how they are structured. And I'll talk about how BRICS is structured and all that in some other video, okay? About this whole thing, the second point, okay? And the third is China can't do it alone either. Because lots of people say, oh, look, petro yuan is about to happen. Iran is going to sell oil in petro yuan and this and that. See, if Iranian oil, okay, if Iranian oil was the only thing, if the crude oil was the only thing, Iranian crude oil was the only some amazing thing in this world, I can say that I can for a moment I can believe that that de-dollarization probably will happen. But it's just crude oil, guys. Come on, the country that owns the dollar is the largest oil producing country in the world. So the third point is that China cannot do it alone either. And the reason is actually a feature of China's own system, one Beijing has no intention of giving up. So let's go through each one of these points, talk about that, and that's going to be eye opener for you if you haven't opened up your eyes. I'm not saying that you should not or it's in a negative way, but I'm saying it so that, older folks, folks who are about to retire, folks who get into this panic mode, people who need these things, the whole retirement, 401k, all these things, right? Especially for these people, I'm making this video so that they understand that it's not going to happen. Now, if US government messes up your retirement, then I am not going to say anything about that. But your retirement, your 401k, none of that will be messed up because of de-dollarization. Okay. So let's get going. Let's move forward. All right. So the first thing is that the only historical precedent is the Eurozone. Okay. So has a reserve currency ever been seriously challenged before? Yes, once. Now, I let me and deliberately that has happened. Okay, and when this happened, it cost Africa's one of the leaders, that is Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. He was killed for that later on in 2013. But then before that, actually, Saddam Hussein was killed. In fact, Saddam Hussein was killed because he started to sell oil in Europe. And that, yes, ladies and gentlemen, that currency is euro. And I want to walk you through what it actually took. Because these four numbers on this slide are not just some random statistics. They are literally the price tag of monetary union. And then somewhat. Some leaders giving their life. Lots of regime changes. So what happened? See, 19 sovereign nations permanently gave up their own currencies. Pay attention to what I'm saying. 19 sovereign nations permanently gave up their own currencies, not temporarily, yes. They still call themselves France, for France calls themselves French, and franc is their currency and all that good stuff. They didn't give up their currencies temporarily, they gave it permanently. The Deutsche Mark, one of the most trusted currencies in the world, the symbol of German economic identity, gone. Germany chose to kill it. That's the political cost we are talking about. Meaning that if, let's say, some grouping, some bloc, I'm not going to name any bloc, decides to take this route, okay? Like, there was around 2024, 2025, and all that, especially 2024, before 2020, 2023, and 2024, those 2 years. There was this talk of BRICS currency, BRICS currency, BRICS currency. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is what it takes to have your own common currency. That's the political cost we are talking about here. One central bank running monetary policy for all of them. Okay? No individual government can set interest rates, print money, or devalue. That's ECB, European Central Bank. That power is gone. And that power is handed to an institution no single country controls. There are 28 countries in the European Union, and out of those countries, none of them has the power. Any country that is part of European Union they don't have the power to make any of those monetary policies. And it took 50 plus years to build this. Treaty of Rome in 1957. Maastricht in 1992. Then Euro launch in what? 1999. 42 years just from the first agreement to a working currency. That's what it took, okay? And it started with just 6 countries. I think in this whole de-dollarization thing, okay, I think only President Putin has been honest about it from the get-go. Okay. In fact, he was so honest that in, I think it was Moscow Business Forum, when he was asked about this de-dollarization question, that hey, will there be a common currency or will there be something that will completely replace the dollar? So he said very honestly, he said that maybe one day, but it's not going to happen in our lifetime. 100% capital account convertibility was done. Okay. It's Euro, basically the whole European Union and Euro and all that thing started with 6 countries. Okay. And then 100% capital account convertibility. Anyone in the world can buy or sell euros anytime, any market, no permission needed, no exit barrier. You can always get out. Brexit is the perfect example of that. And after all of that, 50 years, 19 currencies gone, one supranational bank, full convertibility. The euro today sits at 20% of global foreign exchange reserves. And the dollar is at 57%. When Saddam Hussein actually started to sell uh, the oil in euro, the petro euro was born actually. But and within 6 months, actually, euro soared just sky high. The euro stock market, the bond, treasury, security, they all soared. They are skyrocketed. That's what happened when Saddam Hussein started to sell the oil in euro. Okay, and and petrodollar was still fairly new in the unipolar world, at least. So when that happened, it panicked the Americans. Okay. And what happened to Saddam Hussein, we all know. Now the dollar is at what? 57%. And that is the benchmark everything else we look at today gets measured against this. That's the benchmark. The European Union, the euro is the benchmark of a de-dollarization. So let's get into the chapter 2 of this thing. That BRICS is not that. Lots of people have said that if BRICS is that or not, if why BRICS doesn't have BRICS common currency and everything. So I think if you paid attention to what I talked about in my previous slide, then I think by now lots of those questions have already been answered. That why BRICS does not have BRICS is just not that. BRICS is an organization, okay? BRICS is an organization that's more of like a, a economic cooperation organization. It was primarily formed to challenge the multilateralism and bring up or say promote multipolarity. Okay, now those are two different things. Don't mix them up. Now why is that? See, West likes multilateralism. Okay, West likes multilateralism. Why? Because multilateralism is related to institutions. You want to create another institution, go right ahead, as long as it follows United Nations Charter, its guidelines and all that. Fair enough, very good, very nice. Keep up with starting your institutions and groups and all that, whatever you want to. Fair enough. That's multilateralism. But when it comes to multipolarity, West, the unipolar West, had a problem. Why? Because multipolarity is more of linked to the power game. So when BRICS says the multipolarity, BRICS says that there should be multiple power centers on the globe. There should not be only one country dictating its terms and conditions. That's why world has problem with the multipolarity. Okay, so let's go back to Kazan summit, the big summit, the bold statements, right? But now apply the same benchmark from my previous slide and ask, can BRICS actually do what Europe did? And now look at what BRICS is versus what the European Union required. And like I said just now, that BRICS is a primarily a diplomatic forum. Okay, annual summit joint statements with no central bank. Yes, there is a multilateral bank, NDB, National Development Bank. No common currency, no super national authority. No member state is legally bound to follow anything BRICS decides. It's structurally closer to the G20 than the European Union. It's a group chat that with heads of states. Yeah, there are a few things sometimes they get certain things done and all that, but whatever news and everything that you see around BRICS is mostly either China doing it or China Russia doing it together or Russia and India doing it together, or maybe sometimes occasionally India and China doing it together, or couple of times couple of BRICS countries are involved here and there. And then the media basically uses BRICS, their BRICS as a headline or as a selling point to get the views. All right. So what the European Union required was the complete opposite of what BRICS is. Complete opposite of all that. Like permanent currency surrender, a central bank with real power, a legal framework binding all members, full convertibility, and 50 years before anyone trusted it enough to actually hold it as a reserve. And here's why BRICS specifically cannot get there. China versus India. There are four great powers, right now in the world, in the multipolar world: US, Russia, India, and China. And China versus India, two of the great powers in the BRICS, the two biggest economies in BRICS, two of the most influential countries in the BRICS. In June 2020, India and Chinese soldiers, they basically were in hand-to-hand combat in Galwan Valley. 20 Indian soldiers died, almost 50 to 60 Chinese soldiers died. These were like the casualties along the border in 45 years of after the first war in 1962. And then India responded with what? Not only India basically wagged almost 60 to 100 such Chinese soldiers. They don't tell the data, but if you go look into the satellite data and the US side of stuff, then you find the actual thing. Okay. And India basically responded by banning hundreds of Chinese apps, cutting off Chinese investments in strategic sectors, 1,700 miles of contested border. And this is after all the Galwan Valley that happened. But just recently, also, just 2 days ago, China's Global Times was claiming again one of the India's territories as its own. These people, they give other countries' territories their own names, and they say that, oh, that belongs to us. And these countries are simultaneously BRICS partners and active rivals. Clearly, there is a trust deficit. India has kind of been reluctant on calling China an enemy. Okay, openly that China is our enemy. We will, end China, destroy China. This, that. They're very careful about that language. And when it comes to leader talk at the diplomatic level, also they have their differences, but they don't really get into the pissing contest like President Trump does. Okay, and but here's the thing with all that. My point of telling all that is that you don't build a shared currency with a country you are in a border war with. Look at Russia and China. During the Soviet era, 1959, China had attacked Soviet Union too. This is why Soviet Union was even more inclined to be friends with India, because they realized that if China will be on the US side, because at that time China was, and Pakistan was also on the western side, then Afghanistan was also in a way slipping away from them. They figured that if India also goes on the western side, or the side of the west, then Soviet Union will be surrounded from all the direction, all the sides. And at that time, Soviet Union used to be the neighboring country of India. Their borders were linked. You have to understand this. So now coming back to the subject again, right? So clearly there is a massive distrust within the BRICS countries. Like Brazil's political cycle, every 4 years, policy flips. President Lula, BRICS engagement, Bolsonaro, Washington alignment. A reserve currency that depends on who wins Brazil's next election is not a reserve currency, that's a bet, right? Then look at another example. Just at the tariff, when tariff happened, then President Lula organized the meeting, BRICS emergency meeting. Outcome of that emergency meeting, China basically said that okay, we will remove all the tariffs from Brazil for next 5 years on the coffee and soybean. India imported some of the things from Brazil, their oil as well. Hmm. At the end of the day, what it exposed about the BRICS was that BRICS doesn't even have a framework to counter these type of things. And look at Russia. Russia was expelled. $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves were frozen in 2022. Russia even didn't choose to leave the dollar system, it was thrown out. So Russia, just because Russia is in the BRICS, Russia being in BRICS is not a sign that de-dollarization is working. It's a sign that Russia has no other option. So if there is any kind of misconception, you have to understand this, that BRICS is not a monetary union in progress, okay? So the distance between what BRICS is and what reserve currency displacement requires is basically the distance between a press conference and Germany giving up the Duce mark. Okay, let's move forward. Now let's talk about China, because China has been a very good contender, or so it seems. Okay. So fine enough, right? Fine, fair enough that BRICS cannot collectively do it. And China has been a very good conductor. So what about China on its own? Can China do it on its own? China is world's largest trading nation. CIPS processed around 175 trillion renminbi in 2024. Belt and Road is in yuan. Dozens of bilateral currency agreements. And surely China can push the yuan into reserve status alone. Can it? See, this argument, basically, what I'm saying is that this argument is made all the time. But what happens? It runs straight into the wall you see at the top of this slide. A reserve currency requires full capital account convertibility. What does that mean? Anyone, anywhere can sell your currency anytime, any market. That's what it means. No government permissions, no restrictions, no exit barriers. If you hold it, you can get out. Like if you like for example, dollar. I can take this dollar and go to India, use it, sell it, whatever. People will be happy to take it. No problem. US has this. Eurozone has it. That is, Euro has it. Japan, UK, Switzerland, they all have it. But China doesn't. And if you look at the right side of things, then you find that this is the part the de-dollarization crowd always skips over. See, capital control basically because Beijing controls that, right? So the capital control lets Beijing manage the yuan exchange rate. But what's going to happen without them? A capital outflow from a slowdown, a geopolitical shock, a sentimental shift. All this thing, what happens? With all this causes a rapid depreciation. Beijing cannot allow that. Why? Because capital control stops domestic capital flight. Now, if you open the capital account tomorrow, hundreds and billions in Chinese private savings leaves immediately. Those savings fund state priorities. That's not happening. China controls all that. And capital controls also protect the party from the external pressure. An open capital account is a lever that foreign governments can pull. Beijing will not hand anyone that lever. And all this is not accident or something, okay? These are all deliberate measures that Chinese have taken. So much currency control. All this is structural. They have been maintained for decades because they serve what? China's interests. And the result? After all that internationalization effort, the yuan is at what? 3 to 4% of basically what? 3 to 4% of global SWIFT settlements. Now, I'll give you another number here, okay? There are 11,000 entities that are registered on SWIFT. 11,000 compared to China's CIPS, probably what? 1,500. That's it. Now, if it was like around 8,000 or 9,000, I would say that yes, very nice. Even if you combine all the payment systems of BRICS countries combined together, it will still not probably reach even 5,000. Right? So, Canadian dollars, if you look at it comparatively compared to China's renminbi, it accounts for more. Australian dollar accounts for more. And neither of those are reserve currency candidates. China has already made its choice, capital control over convertibility. It's not going to predict. I mean, we're not going to say that what China might do. It's completely unpredictable the way China controls its currency. So even if, say, petro yuan started to rise, but just because of the Chinese political system, internal currency control and all, countries are not going to accept it. Right? So what exactly then is going to change this whole entire thing? What exactly is going to bring the de-dollarization? That is the final mother lode of all scenarios. And I want to be very clear about something before we wrap this up, okay? The dollar dropping from 72% to 57%, that's real, okay? It will probably keep dropping slowly. Central banks are diversifying, they're buying gold, building bilateral payment system. That's not nothing, that is something, okay? But here's the big difference between declining at the margins and being structurally displaced. Because whatever you see before this, right, like bilateral payment systems and all, these are just the alternatives. It's like Rumble trying to compete with YouTube, or some other video site trying to compete with YouTube. Those are alternatives, but they're not YouTube, right? So that's what I want you to understand. And the first is happening, that is declining margins and all that. Second needs to be very specific, because whenever we talk about structural changes and all, then you have to be very specific about it. And here it is. The one scenario that I was talking about, that one scenario that could actually de-dollarize rapidly. A new bloc achieves European Union level monetary integration. That same requirement that you saw into the Eurozone slide, now applied to a new group of countries. Permanent currency surrender to a common institution. Not reversible, okay? A supranational central bank that no single member can overrule. One unified legal system for sovereign debt across the whole bloc. A common currency with full convertibility and capital markets deep enough to absorb trillions of dollars in reserve flows. And sustain political commitments for decades through recessions, through elections, through geopolitical shocks. Remember what happened with Brexit, when United Kingdom left the European Union. Why do you think they did that? They left the European Union because they realized that it's going to collapse. They will have to give up. Let's not use the word collapse. They realize that they will have to give up their currency, sterling pound. They realized this thing. But as soon as they realized that their currency is basically losing the international value, so when your currency, reserve currency, loses value in the international market, then imports become very, very difficult. And when imports become difficult, then it leads to what? Inflation, hyperinflation, no GDP growth, all that. That's what was hurting United Kingdom's economy. So they figured that, hey, why would we want to leave something and destroy our current? Why would we want to be part of something that is going to destroy their entire identity? So again, coming back to this whole thing, what I just described, could this happen? There are candidates, all right? There are candidates for this, like China, ASEAN Monetary Union, a GCC currency, the currency that Gulf has been talking about this since 2001, the 2 decades of discussion, but essentially zero progress. Then Eurasian bloc around Chinese economic gravity, or Eurasian bloc combined with Russia, Eurasia, and India, because Russia and and Russia and India already trade in rupee ruble, and then you have India already is going to sign a free trade agreement with the Eurasian bloc too. And if you look into it, then Eurasia and Russia and India, they do not have any kind of divergences as far as, like, for example, border dispute, any kind of conflict, any kind of, something that will erase the trust, right? So instead of China, let's talk about India, Eurasian bloc, Russia and India. But none of these are anywhere near happening. The basic political prerequisite is the enough mutual trust to permanently hand over control of your currency. It just does not exist in any of these groups. not in ASEAN, not in Gulf, not in post-Soviet space, nothing. This is like a generational project, okay? Not 10 years, decades, 20 years like that. You don't know when, but it's clearly not in 1 or 2 year thing, right? Which means what? Which means that it's not happening in your lifetime. It requires some serious political will. And I must tell you this, that there are some serious, the leaders of these four great powers are some serious leaders, okay? They have done some great things. That's why you see four great powers right now. Otherwise, there was a unipolar world, right? So, and if these leaders cannot do it, I can assure you that uh, even I don't think that there is anyone who can do it. So, coming back to the end of this whole thing is that we started with the question that 72% in 2000, then 57% today, right? So, where did that 15% go? And here's the full answer. Some went to the euro, the only successful case of reserve currency construction in modern history. 50 years, 19 currencies surrendered got to 20%, less than a third of dollar's share. Then little bit went to gold after Russia's reserve got frozen in 2022. Central bank around the world started buying gold at record levels. That's insurance, not replacement. Then some went to smaller currencies, Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, Swiss franc, or maybe let's say, large economies, when the large economies started to trade in national currencies like India and Russia, or China and Russia, like that. But all that was fractions of a percentage, not a lot. Okay. And definitely it didn't none of it go to yuan, none of it went to BRICS like that completely as a block, and none of it is a structural challenge to the dollar, that's for sure. Now, countries are basically what they're doing. They are actually accumulating gold. Countries are building bilateral payment systems. Countries are diversifying at the margin. All of that is real. But all that is hedging. That's not de-dollarizing. They're not building a replacement that, yeah, let's build it, let's get rid of dollar, let's get rid of everything. They're building what? The fire exit, just in case the building ever catches fire. Meaning that, let's say if they get sanctioned or something, then they have their own payment system, they have their own mechanism to trade in their own currency, and there you have it. While continuing to run everything through the dollar. So the world is actually not moving away from the dollar. The world is learning to live with the dollar while quietly building, like I said, fire exits just in case. And I think that until someone pays the price, Europe paid 50 years, 19 surrendered currencies, one institution, no single government control. The dollar stays the system. Not because it's perfect, not because it's fair, because nobody has paid the price to replace it. If this gave you a useful framework, then share it. Okay. Dollar is going to stay here. Don't worry about your uh, 401k going anywhere. Don't worry about this whole de-dollarization lobby, whatever. None of that is going to change. Dollar system is here to stay. It's going to stay. So it is what it is. And world will eventually learn to live with it. Okay. So this is it for this video, guys. Please do like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you guys in another video. Take care.